Welcome, everybody, to the Only Podcast. My name is Chris Fanini, your host, as always, and I'm joined by current TheOnlyColors.com managing editor Joe Toohey, who will actually be stepping down shortly as the managing editor, just simply due to time constraints. Joe's got a lot of stuff going on. I've had a lot of stuff going on. And so if anybody out there listening is interested in just kind of managing the site, contributing more, reach out to Joe or someone at TOC and let them know you're interested. Obviously, we got a great community here, and Joe's done a great job taking the site to the next step after Pete Rossman and me and KJ and some other folks ran it. Looks like we're looking for a new person to kind of just steer the ship. So if someone's interested in that, and you do get paid a little bit for it. So if someone's interested in that, reach out to Joe. Joe, how are you?
Doing all right. I'm not gonna lie, I'm not particularly sober right now. So
yeah, I saw. I knew with this game, we're recording this right after the Rutgers game, and You had mentioned on Twitter that you were drinking a little bit early because of the way that first half was going. Is that
yeah?
Correct?
I mean, it certainly slowed down in the second half. So my theory, and this was something I tweeted out before the game even started, was that I was gonna just drink every time that Rutgers scored. So at the under 16 timeout, I was one beer in already, and then things slowed down in the second half, but the first half was a little on the rough side. So I think I'm still pretty coherent, so that's helpful. But the Q&A session we'll have at the end of this podcast is going to be particularly interesting.
Yeah, there's not a ton to talk about, obviously, with just the Rutgers game. And wait, when did they play? Who did they play before that?
Before Rutgers?
Yeah,
it was Penn State this past weekend on Sunday.
Okay. So yeah, there have been two kind of blowout games. Not a whole ton to talk about. We'll talk a little about the Rutgers game, but also Joe will be stepping down as the managing editor. He'll still be on the podcast. He'll still be around the site. Just simple time constraints for him with everything going on, such as getting ready to live with Blake O'Neill. How's that? What's the latest on that, Joe?
No updates as of yet. All the paperwork's in, but he hasn't started moving stuff in. So pretty soon he'll be, around. There was one point where I needed to, complete some paperwork, and I was very close to sending an email to Blake O'Neill. I'll try not to drop the ball on this. And I decided against it. I decided that was going to be in bad taste.
That would have been very rude.
Well, and I feel like I got to get to know the guy a little bit before I start making those types of jokes, right? And I think he'll be a good sport about it. But
he seems like a great dude. I mean, everything I've seen and heard about him seems like a good dude. So, plus, we talked about the Australian accent already. That's always cool. So,
yeah,
that's your that's your weekly. Joe might live with the Michigan punter who dropped the ball. Update for this week on the Only Podcast. But next, the Rutgers game, which was tonight as we're recording this. And it was, to say it was a tale of two halves would be a bit of an understatement. MSU led 43-41 at halftime against one of the worst Power 5 conference teams ever, but pulled away in the second half for a 97-66 win. Bryn Forbes sets a Big Ten record with 11 three-pointers. He scored 33 points. And, actually all of his buckets were threes. So, weird game. First half was real bad for them. Second half was real good as they more than doubled them up, 54-25 in the second half. So I guess starting off with this game, Joe, I know you're a little under the influence, but your thoughts on this game.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was very clear that this particular MSU team was not very interested in guarding anybody in the first half. That seems very obvious, right? The first half 4 factors that I tweeted out showed that Rutgers was shooting had a 70% effective field goal percentage in the first half, which is wild. I mean, they've eclipsed 60% from the field in terms of effective field goal percentage, I think one time in this season, right? So it's that was the biggest thing. It just seemed like the team was not particularly interested in guarding anybody. And then in the second half, it was, an offensive show. I think that the defense had a little bit of room to improve as well, but once you get out to a 20-point lead in the first 5 minutes of the second half, that slows down a little bit. Tom Izzo gave some credit to Aaron Harris in the second half after his second half performance in terms of the way that he guarded Corey Sanders, who had a very good first half. He scored 13, I think, of Rutgers' first 20-some points, somewhere in there. So that was encouraging, and I thought Aaron Harris's performance overall was encouraging as well. He seemed to share the ball and participate in the flow of the offense, but still be efficient. And then Marvin Clark, my guy, Marvin Clark was very good. He had double-digit points. Big Ten Network gave him some sixth man of the game award or whatever. But ultimately, I think that he was just an effective power forward off the bench. And I think that the fact that he's been able to string a couple games together where he's been effective is going to be really helpful going forward. So, I mean, weird first half, was more to form in the second half. But, yeah, that's not all that strange for this MSU team in general. I did a little research about how MSU teams have performed. This particular MSU team has performed in first halves this season. I don't know if you want me to rattle off some interesting stats on that or not.
Hold on to that.
Sure.
Hold on to that. Also, I forgot to mention, I didn't notice any sound issues last week. I don't think we got any complaints on that. I hope the sound is good this time. Also, there's a dog in the room I'm in, another one of our foster dogs. So if you hear any rattling or moaning or barking, it's not me. It is the dog. So
I'd also like to mention that there's a Red Dog beer in the room that I'm in. So if you hear any rattling,
Red Dog,
or barking, then it could be on my side as well.
Is it yours, the Red Dog?
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Okay. Good. I used to back in 2008. I drank one after every Red Wings win in the playoffs that year. So, good beer. It's a good beer. So I just wanted to point that out. If you hear some rustling in this room, because I know we've had noise issues, sound issues in the past, so that's why I mentioned that. So, but yeah, that first half there was a point where Rutgers started off 11 for 15 shooting with 3 offensive rebounds, which is like you can't play much worse defense in that period. And not only was Rutgers 70% effective field goal percentage defense, that was against MSU, who has the number 1 effective field goal percentage defense. Like it was like it was insane. And an update after that win also. MSU is still at number 2 overall in KenPom, but they are number 1 in offense, the top most efficient offense in the country. Yeah, the defensive performance in the first half, real bad, real bad. I don't know if just MSU they were overlooking their opponent. Just some lazy defense on some passes, and Rutgers did hit a couple of difficult shots, but first half real bad. Second half, also in that first half they got a little chucky. They got chucked a little bit from the 3-point line. They went the final 5 minutes and 4 seconds of the first half without even attempting a 2-point shot. They took 8 shots in the final 5 minutes, all of them threes. They made 3 of them. All 3 were by Forbes, and that's pretty crazy for a team to go 5 minutes and a half without even attempting a 2-pointer. So first half was ugly. Second half, they get on a quick run to push the lead up to double digits. Never really looked back. Forbes couldn't miss. Like I said, he went 11 for 16 from deep. He went 17 for 26 on the year from deep against Rutgers. It's 65%. Big Ten record. And MSU got back to their normal selves. And they still covered. This line was 24.5. And I said before the game, I said, even man, that seems low. And then they're up 2 at halftime. You're like, but then they still win by 31 points and covered. And the walk-ons and end of the bench players didn't. They held on to that lead. So yeah. All right. So what were you going to say after that?
Well, so yeah, riffing on what you were saying about MSU settling for 3-point jumpers, I think that the biggest concern about this team in the tournament, both Big Ten and NCAA, is that they are inconsistent at times. So if you look at games that MSU had, even in games that they won, going back, and these were just from memory, so I went and checked KenPom box scores, but against Kansas, MSU was down 28-15 at one point in the first half. Against Providence, I think early in the second half, they were down 45-39. Against Louisville in the first half, they were down 21-8. Against Oakland in the first half, they were down 53-39. Halftime of the first Iowa game, they were down 37-23. Halftime of the second Iowa game, they were down 47-25. At one point in the Wisconsin game, they were down by 5. At one point in the Nebraska game, they were down by 8. At one point in the Purdue game, they were down by 18.
And then the Florida game did they trail in that game, or was that just?
They did. It was pretty competitive, so there wasn't a double-digit deficit at any point.
That I remember, but that was another one of those games where they pulled away at the end in a game that was close otherwise.
Right, and this is actually something interesting. So I was a bigger NBA fan sort of in the mid-2000s, and I remember the Sacramento Kings and the Dallas Mavericks were both big three-point shooting teams. And so part of the knock on those teams was that they weren't going to be as consistent just because they relied on the three-point shot. Now, you see the second half of this game where Bryn Forbes couldn't miss, and even in the first half, Bryn Forbes was doing pretty well. But these sort of dry spells in games could end up costing this MSU team in the tournament, right? So when you've got a single game elimination tournament, you have one bad shooting night against a team that is shooting pretty well for whatever reason, you can get eliminated pretty quickly. I think that in previous years, the single game elimination tournament was something that helped Michigan State basketball. I think that Izzo demonstrably does a very good job of coaching up teams in the tournament. However, I think in some cases, the fact that defense was what they did well and sort of more reliable offense was something that they did pretty well was a boon to those types of teams, right? If you have things that you can do predictably well, if teams that are really good three-point shooting teams that happen to encounter an arena in which they aren't shooting very well, you can have an upset. But this is an MSU team that should perform quite well in the tournament, but because they're a jump shooting team to some degree, though, I think the percentage of three-pointers that they shoot relative to overall field goal attempts is not huge.
Right.
It's still a jump shooting team to some degree, and they rely on Bryn Forbes and Denzel Valentine to hit some outside shots.
Right. I mean,
I do think that this particular MSU team could be susceptible to an upset in the tournament.
It's possible. I mean, you look at the losses against Louisville and the recent tournament losses against Louisville and Duke. They were just completely, absolutely ice cold from the field, and two of the worst offensive performances in the tournament you'll ever see from an MSU team. They're number one in the country in like I said, adjusted offense, but three-point shooting too, number one in the country. And so, if those threes are falling, what are they? Okay, they're top 102-point offense. It's decent, but they don't get to the free throw line. They're 317th in getting to the line. So you can't. If they're not falling, is Denzel Valentine going to drive more? Forbes hasn't really added much of that to his game. He can hit the mid-range jumper, but he doesn't do much driving to the hoop. He only attempted two 2-point shots on the day. But yeah, they're 177th in the country in 3-pointers relative to shots taken. So this isn't like a Michigan situation where they're just all day chucking and you got to get them in. They do other things. And again, I think the passing, again, still number one in assist rate in the country. So I think that's where you feel a little better about them avoiding an upset like that, in that they still have many ways to attack you. They're still a very good passing team across the board, everybody on the floor, except for maybe Gavin Schilling. And they do, but if they're not hitting from outside and Costello's in foul trouble, then what are they doing? I think it was at the 5 losses, Forbes is shooting like 16% from 3, and they've pretty much got. If he's had a really bad game, they pretty much lost him. But the other thing I would say is, they have 3 1-point losses, but other than that, I mean, they don't have many close wins. All these wins are blowouts. Ever since the Oakland game, they have 2 wins by single. So in Big Ten play, they have 2 wins by single digits, 12-5, and two of those wins were single digits. Minnesota on the road, 69-61, and then Maryland at home, 74-65. So this is a team that hasn't been in many close games either, and they've lost a couple of those in Purdue, Nebraska, Wisconsin. And look at that Purdue game. Rafael Davis completely shut down Bryn Forbes, and MSU was in a major rut for a while there. So like you say, if Forbes gets completely shut down in a game, are they going to be able to, make enough plays to win? I mean, they have on the year. They've always come through in the second halves. I know we talked about it earlier, but they have the depth, and they can go guys deep if someone's out. You're seeing more guys get some playing time. Marvin Clark's getting more. Ellis is getting more. So they've got those guys kind of in the bank if they need to do anything. So, yeah, I mean, it's possible, but, is what it is. What do you think?
Well, in that Purdue game, you have to think about the fact that Rafael Davis not only did a great job guarding Bryn Forbes, but also hit almost 10% of his career threes in a single game.
Right. That's why the deficit stretched out to up to whatever you said, 18, because he had the game of his life.
Right, and so the other piece that has been very interesting to watch from an in-game tactical perspective is that they've been attempting to get Denzel Valentine the ball in the post a lot more, and that's been effective to some degree. I mean, he's got an ability to do that. If he's basically playing point guard and he's got a guy who's 6'2" guarding him, I think that offensive strategy is something that can be effective going forward, especially because Deonta Davis doesn't have a left hand, so he's got half of an offensive game. Gavin Schilling isn't quite there, so yeah, I mean, it's they have to figure out some play strategy in the paint that's going to get them points, and I think Denzel Valentine in the post against guards is something that could be effective in the tournament, especially against teams who haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, that's why I said, that's where I think, Deonta Davis has had a decent freshman year, but I think, and he may very well be gone for the NBA after this, but he may leave as a player who you never really got all that close to his potential. He hasn't developed really much of any offensive game yet, and it's not surprising, especially in Izzo's system. It usually takes big men until their junior or senior years to reach a point where they feel comfortable in the offense. So Davis may never get to that point, but if Costello gets in foul trouble, they really lose any semblance of inside offense unless it turns into Valentine posting up, which I think is something they can do. So,
well, and the other point I'd make there about Costello is that it isn't just foul trouble that stops him from being effective, right? If you've got somebody like AJ Hammons who is guarding Costello, then he can also be similarly ineffective. And then at that point, you're back sort of in the same spot as if he wasn't in the game at all.
I mean, I don't know how many AJ Hammondses are out there too.
Right.
I mean, he's an All-American quality player. Yeah, I mean, I think more than anything, I think this team's passing is what just sets it apart. I mean, you look at the Ohio State game when they pulled away in the second half. There, it's because they just got on board with the passing, and I think that, I mean, this team is not that talented. I mean, like I said, Davis is all potential right now. He's just kind of a big guy who can block and rebound right now. But Costello's turning himself into an all Big Ten big man in Valentine's Player of the Year. But Forbes has played well above, I think, what anybody thought he could be. Harris is kind of getting to that spot too. But for you look at this offense, and for it to be the number one efficient offense in the country, I think relative to their talent is surprising. And I think that comes down to the passing. And I think when they get in trouble, it comes back to defense, and then it comes back to making the extra pass. And that's when this team's at their best. And that's what they've been doing most of the year. I mean, 25.
Well, and I think this team is the bizarro 2011-2012 team in some ways, right? So the 2011-2012 team wasn't supposed to be very good. It was after a season in which MSU really failed all expectations. They came into the year number 2 in the country. They ended up losing in the first round to UCLA. But in 2011-2012, that was Draymond's senior year. He kind of coalesced a team that was more than the sum of its parts, right? I mean, Austin Thornton and Brandon Wood were major parts of that team. And so I can see a lot of similarities between that team and this team, where, this team wasn't expected to do a whole lot, partially because they were coming off of a Final Four run, an unexpected Final Four run. And then also because it was coming before a big recruiting class, but behind a senior guy like a Draymond Green. I think Denzel Valentine is Draymond Greenish in a lot of ways in his versatility and leadership ability. A team kind of coalesced together, and despite so MSU in 2011-2012 did a much better job of kind of coming together during Big Ten season. There were a lot of kind of rough non-conference losses, but they were able to win in the conference. They ended up winning a share of the Big Ten title, not outright. I actually have kind of a good story about that for another podcast. But so in general, like, I think that these two teams have a lot in common, and it's going to be interesting to see how that kind of plays out in the tournament. I think the 2011-2012 team was a bizarre Tom Izzo team in that they underperformed in the tournament, and I think that this again.
And that was what the Louisville loss when they were the 1 seed.
Exactly, and they lost to Louisville. To blessing Louisville team though, right? I mean, that Louisville team ended up winning a national title a year later, and was obviously very talented. So yeah, I mean, this MSU team, could end up getting the wrong team in March to some degree, but
let's talk about that. Let's transition into the March here. Well, so all right, so if they beat Ohio State over in the final game, they're the 2 seed in the Big Ten tournament. If they lose, whole bunch of things could still happen. Spartan Dan may or may not end up getting a post up about that,
yeah, Spartan Dan may or may not end up getting an aneurysm about that. I mean,
he put together the possibility charts the last couple of years, and they were insane. This one might even be crazier. But if I think if they get to the Big Ten title game, they're good for a 1 seed. I think they're in a 1 seed spot right now. I think they may very well be the number 2 overall seed. I wanted to look at the locations here, because it's been kind of a topic now. Would MSU rather be in the a 2 seed in the Midwest in Chicago, or be a number 1 seed and
I've got a
go out to,
suggestion.
yeah.
Let's. Do you want to transition to Q&A? Because I think that we can hit that point as well as a number of others.
Yeah. Someone. Someone. Let me pull it up here. Someone asked who.
So I can read it off. I've got it pulled up right now.
Okay. It was at Louis CA719 asked, does MSU really want the 1 out west over the 2 in Chicago, or is this a chance they send KU south? I think most likely. You go ahead.
I did a little research on this just to see where the regionals were, because I didn't know where they might be, and then sort of sub-regionals as well. Strangely enough, like, Michigan is a very good location to be for the NCAA tournament, because most of the sites are in the East to Midwest kind of region. So
yeah,
there's there's 2 there, there's maybe 3 sites that would be outside of Big Ten country, or so it's like Raleigh, North Carolina is another one. But
the locations are Providence, Des Moines, Raleigh, Denver, Brooklyn, St. Louis, Oklahoma City, Spokane. Those are the first and second round locations, and then the regionals are Louisville, Chicago, Philly, and Anaheim. So I mean, really, only one of those is outside maybe MSU's footprint, so to speak, based on alumni and stuff like that. So yeah.
So if we're talking about the 2011-2012 team, that was a team that ended up with a number 1 seed in the West, and then ended up not not doing as well as they could have. So I think the fact that the southern location is Louisville makes it extremely advantageous for MSU to end up in a regional that is not the West. I mean, I would think I would travel probably to Louisville for a game like that, and very possibly Chicago if it was the Midwest.
Right, and I was wondering this on Kansas. Do you think the closest for them would be probably Louisville, right? So that would still.
I think it's a toss-up. It's really a toss-up.
Yeah.
So I wonder if they would I really wonder if they were the overall number 1 seed, if they would call the Kansas athletic department and say, "Hey, where would you prefer to be?" But regardless, I don't think it really matters, and and similarly, I don't think it matters that much to MSU, right? I mean, if MSU's a 1 seed and they end up in Chicago, great. If MSU's a 1 seed and they end up in Louisville, great. I think it depends on who is the next spot, or the next 2 spots down. So if the next number 1 seed is Villanova, well, then Villanova's in Philadelphia. Okay, so then who's the third? Is it Xavier? Because Xavier would definitely rather be in Louisville. Is it MSU? They'd probably rather be in Chicago. I mean, I think that there's a lot of variables there, but at the same time, as an MSU fan, I really just don't want to be in Anaheim. Give me anywhere but Anaheim.
Well, that's what I was going to say. So, I mean, between the 2, a 1 seed in the West Regional, or a 2 seed in the Midwest, which would you rather? Which do you think MSU would rather have?
So, in an average year, well, actually, that's a more interesting question maybe than you intended to be. So, I think in an average year, you say a 1 seed regardless of where it's at. But so if you look at the top 12 teams in college right now, there's a lot of parity, right?
There's the point I was going to bring up after you.
Right. So there's a lot of parity, but the top 12. So the 12th team is probably higher quality than you'd get in an average year, but your top team is not. So I think that there might be a decent difference in playing a 3 seed and playing a 4 or 5 seed to get into the Sweet 16. So that's a tough question. I think.
Well, it's supposed to be. We ask the tough questions here.
Yeah, because that's what the only colors is all about. The only podcast is all about.
The way
I
look
say you want to be close. You want to be close to home. I mean, there's very few teams in this tournament that scare me, and that's another mailbag question that we've got. But yeah, there just aren't that many teams that scare me. I think we'll do okay against whatever team ends up.
Yeah,
being
I
there.
think there's really only 6-ish top teams. And actually, there happen to be the top 6 in KenPom. Kansas, MSU, Virginia, Villanova, North Carolina, Oklahoma. After that, I think it's a sharp drop in what I perceive to be quality of teams. So there's no team in this I think you wish to avoid. You know, there isn't a Kentucky from last year or something like that. Then again, MSU's history against Duke, maybe you just hope MSU's not in Duke's region or North Carolina, because they seem to end MSU at every possible opportunity, and that may be just a complete luck of the draw. But between the two, between a 1 seed out west and a 2 seed with the possibility of Chicago, I think MSU would absolutely rather take the 2. Now the other question. No, go ahead. Go ahead before I move on.
And you don't mention North Carolina in that either. I mean, I think North Carolina is an Achilles heel.
Yeah, they're in that top 6.
Right.
Of what are the top teams? And
so are we gonna rap real quick about teams that you hope MSU doesn't see in the tournament, or I feel like this is the right.
Someone else asked that. Who was it? I don't know if I got it. I don't have it. Do you have it? So did someone?
I think that was actually from TOC. Nope, it was not.
Oh, it was FlyY32 at FLYWY32. What's the team or two we don't want to see in the tournament? Bad matchup, team who could get hot, etc. I think North Carolina and Duke, just because of like history. Like this Duke team isn't nearly as talented as past teams, but they just, I mean, MSU just can never beat them. So I think those two teams have to be on the list. Other than that, I mean, I would say Virginia, but MSU has knocked Virginia out of the tournament for 2 straight years, so I don't think MSU would at all be. I think we know what MSU can do against Virginia. They beat Oklahoma last year too, and you know, do you want to avoid someone like Buddy Hield? Maybe. West Virginia presses, but I think this MSU team would be very good against the press. So. Not particularly. I don't think there's a team. It kind of goes into the wrong question. There's not a team I don't think MSU can't beat. I mean, they've beaten the number 1 team. So I'd only list Duke and North Carolina just because of history.
Well, I mean, I think that there's 2 or 3 teams that I'd throw in there.
Well, North Carolina are really good too. So obviously.
Yeah. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I think. Kentucky is a team that I would rather not play. I mean, they're always really young, and young teams tend to perform a little bit better in the tournament. I think that Calipari is probably an underrated tournament coach, and they're just always going to be insanely talented. That's number 1. Number 2 is if this could possibly happen, I don't know. Iowa, despite the fact that they have faded down the stretch, you know, you can always see a Big Ten team in the tournament. Maybe it's very unlikely or whatever, but at the same time, I still would rather not see Iowa, given that they dominated MSU a couple times, and both those times Valentine was involved.
Yeah. I feel a lot different about that than I did 2 weeks ago. Iowa has just completely fallen off a cliff. I think they've lost 4 in a row, 5 of 6. They had something like a 70%. Spartan Dan said they had a 70% chance of winning the Big Ten outright, and now they may not even get a double bye. I think MSU would be very motivated to play them, and I don't think it's the same Iowa team as before. I mean, I don't know if I'm so. I mean, if this was the Iowa team of a month ago, absolutely. I thought Iowa was one of the best teams in the country a month ago, but they've just completely fallen off.
And then the last one, which is sort of a dark horse, is Wichita State. Wichita State plays very good defense, which I think could. And at the same time, They've been pretty unlucky. So I mean, to me, that's one of those where you could end up playing them in like a third or fourth round
Yeah.
game, and just not like who you ended up with in a game like that. But other than that, like, I mean, Virginia, Villanova, those teams don't scare me. Very few teams in the ACC scare me. Like, yeah, there's relatively few, but at the same time, they're there to some degree.
One thing,
North Carolina and Duke, though.
Yeah, one thing this MSU team has, though, that an MSU team maybe hasn't had since 2009, they have the horses this time to match up with anybody. I know we talked about before about the talent not being that good, but based on how the guys are playing, they've got the guys to match up with anybody in the country. This isn't – I don't see them going into a matchup with anybody where in the past where you look at them against Duke last year to go, well, Duke's got a hell of a lot more good players, pro potential players. MSU's got that. They've got the horses to match up with these top teams, and that's something they haven't had in a while, and that's why this is their best chance for a national title. And well, I guess maybe the 13 team had the horses. They got hot late. They got back on track late before the hot UConn team beat them.
13-14, yeah.
Yeah. 2014 team. So I guess they had the horses that year too. And they were up late in that game and could have made the Final Four, and you never know what could have happened.
I'm already drinking, Chris. You don't have to encourage me further.
But this team has the horses that last year's team didn't. So and that leads to the question. I think MSU and Kansas have shown they're a step ahead of everybody else in the country right now. And between the two, I would take MSU over Kansas. These teams are a lot different from the last time they played at the beginning of the year. Kansas added player. MSU's a completely different lineup. They're both teams are playing out of their minds right now. But I think I would take MSU in that game based on the matchups. And I think MSU's playing like the best team in the country right now. What do you think? I know Kansas just blew out Texas on the road, and that's why they jumped MSU into number 1 in KenPom. But what do you think?
So I want to distinguish between two questions here, because I think there's one question which is MSU playing the best in the country? And then I think that there's a second question, which is, should MSU win the championship, right? I mean, is it reasonable to sort of lump these two questions together to some extent? I mean, I realize that in a one-game elimination tournament, it's hard for individual teams to be a favorite.
Izzo's always quick to say you need a little bit of luck to win the title. The talent can get you so far, but Izzo has said before, if Kenyon Martin doesn't get hurt, maybe MSU doesn't win the championship in 2000. So, you kind of need some of those breaks. So I would never say the team has to win the championship. I know we talked last week. Would it be a disappointment if they didn't make the championship game? I think at this point, yeah. If they reach the Final Four again, I think Final Four is the minimum for them right now. Based on Izzo's sister, I think the Final Four is the minimum most years, just because of what the program's done. The issue is getting past that and they've only made 2 championship games in all of Izzo's Final Fours.
Yeah, so I think so going back to my original question here, which was, is MSU the best team in the country, and should they win a championship? I think that number one, are they the best team in the country is very, very possible, right? They're number 2 right now in KenPom. Sagarin, they've been number 1 or number 2 for quite a while. There's a lot of predictive metrics that they're doing quite well in, and so you got to say, yeah. I mean, maybe they are. It could be. Let me look at they're number 3 in terms of composite rankings by Ken Massey. So yes, maybe they are the best in the country, but regardless, because of the fact that the best teams in the country aren't as good as they might have been in previous years, 538 gave MSU a little bit better than a 10% chance of winning the national championship, based on a post that came a couple days ago. And so, should they win the championship? Well, I don't think that it's ever really possible to say. I mean, even when Kentucky was at their very peak, right? Even those teams are probably not 50%, not more than 50% likely to win the title. So ultimately, I would say,
I think if you're undefeated going into the
maybe
tournament, I'm not in terms of odds, but I think expectations are if you're undefeated going into the tournament, you should win the championship. And if it's anything short of that, it's a failure or disappointment.
Right. But there's a difference between expectations and then mathematical likelihood, right?
I'm saying expectations. I'm not talking math.
Sure. So, and I think that MSU fans in 2013, 2014 got kind of caught up in that as well, right? I mean, the expectations were that MSU team was going to, at the very least, make the Final Four and might be the favorite, odds-on favorite to win the title, given just the players that they had and the fact that Tom Izzo's the coach and all these things. But
I think that's happening this year. I mean, that's happened now. I've said before, Vitale said he penciled them in. They're the Vegas favorites. I imagine when it kind of depends what happens. If they win the Big Ten tournament, I think they'll be everybody's pick to win the championship. Kind of like what happened in 2014.
Which weirdly, I mean, to me, winning the Big Ten tournament almost hurts their chances to some degree, just because I think that Denzel Valentine is so important that if he plays more minutes than you would want him to,
I know that used to be the thing. Izzo doesn't try in the Big Ten tournament because he saves it for March. But if you kind of look at it, that long period in the 2000s when they didn't do well in the Big Ten tournament, they didn't do well in March either, really, until 2009 there when they reached the Final Four. They went at kind of a stretch there where they weren't doing much of anything in March, actually. But I think winning the Big Ten tournament in 2014 very much got them back on track from coming back from the injuries. I think that was a big factor in them getting to where they were and being 8 minutes away or so from the Final Four. I think playing in the championship game last year and losing provided benefits for the team that ended up making it to the Final Four. Does this team need it? I don't know. They seem plenty confident already. And they've only lost 2 games by more than a single point. So, I don't think confidence is any sort of issue. Nairn isn't the most healthy, but he is where he is. And Valentine, you kind of want to save his minutes. So, maybe. But if they win the Big Ten tournament, they may make a case to be, depending on what happens with Kansas, they may they have I think they still have a chance at the number 1 overall seed if they win out, and depending on who they beat in the Big Ten, depending on what happens with Kansas. So that's another possibility too. So
which is crazy. That shouldn't be the case for this particular team, in my opinion.
We'll talk next week about the Big Ten tournament, and I guess a little bit more and what you think they need to do or what we think would be best for them. But right now, I'm not going to say they should just get out early to save their legs, but I'm not going to say go all out for it either. I'm not sure on this one. There were past years I think it was important. Other years it was important. It didn't matter. So I don't know. We can talk more about that next week when ahead of the tournament. But
sure.
But I'm not going to eliminate anything on that yet.
So to answer the questions, is MSU the best team in the country? I think that the answer is arguably. And then
Does
does
that
MSU
an
win the
answer?
championship? The answer is, I mean, arguably is an answer, right? I mean,
Are you
could
arguing it?
argue.
Who's arguing it? You. The point is that you make the argument, not somebody else. Are you? I think right now they are playing like the best team in the country, and I
So
think
I would
them and Kansas have separated themselves as the top two teams. They're a step above everybody else. If you put them on if you put them on the court against each other, I would take MSU again. Not by a lot, but we're not here to say arguably, and we're here to make takes and declarations.
Okay. So but the point here is that if we're making hot takes, then you said Kansas and MSU have separated themselves. Is MSU the best in the country? Yes or no?
I think yes.
Okay, I would say no in that case because I think that it's between MSU and 3 or 4 other teams potentially, and that's fine.
It has to be somebody. Somebody has to be Somebody has to be the best team in the country right now. I mean,
right. And I say no. I say it's not MSU.
Okay. Who do you think it is? Who would you go with?
Well, so the question is MSU the best team in the country? It isn't who is the best team in the country.
I'm asking you who you think it is. If it's not MSU, it has to be somebody.
Let's go with Kansas. I'll say Kansas.
That they make a very strong case with how they've been playing. Absolutely. Sure.
And I think that we're on the same page when it comes to MSU winning a championship. I think that it's hard to say, even if they are the best team in the country, as you claim, it's still just very difficult to win it all.
By saying they're the best team in the country, if the tournament started today, they would be my pick. I'm not saying with great confidence or I'm giving them a 70% chance, but it has to be somebody. And of all the teams, that's who I would go with. And that brings us to the question of where was it? It was who has a better chance to win championship? MSU basketball or Leicester City in the Premier League? Joe, I know you don't know anything really about soccer, so I will give you the Leicester City's odds of winning the championship are now 46%.
Oh shit, that's a lot better than I expected you to say.
Well, yeah, it kind of changed. It actually went up 5% today. It was previously 41%. And the team behind them is 33%, and then 11, 9, and 1. I imagine since you don't believe MSU is the best team in the country, your percentage chances of MSU winning a tournament are lower.
Yeah, absolutely. And the reason for that is twofold. One is that even if you are the best team in the country, probably 40-some% is generous. MSU is arguably the best team in the country, given our last argument. But regardless, it's certainly less than 40%. 538 in their piece gave MSU about an 11 or 12% chance, and part of that is that MSU might not end up with a 1 seed is the thing, right? So if MSU was very clearly a 1 seed, then the odds would be a little bit better. But there's a decent chance that MSU ends up with a 2 seed in the tournament, at which point, it's kind of hard to be the favorite as a 2 seed.
I think in this past week they moved up a lot higher than people thought. Like, we had this debate, which one of the two would you have? I think based on the polls and based on the analytics, they seem to be the clear number 2 team in the country. I know they're number 3 in the coaches poll, but I think when you factor that in and you factor some of the advanced analytics that the committee looks at, if they were seeding today, I think they would make MSU the number 2 overall seed. So, but we still have the whole Big Ten tournament, and if they lose a game, does that knock them down to a 2 seed? I guess it's possible. But right now, I mean, I think they're firmly a number 1 seed right now. But that Big Ten tournament is always kind of lingering. Kansas, I don't know. I don't think Kansas can be knocked off of a number 1 spot, a number 1 seed, but I think MSU still can.
Right, and I mean, we haven't mentioned this at all, but it's really quite bizarre that Indiana, with a week to go, clinched an outright Big Ten championship,
well,
given
okay.
the teams that they fucking lost to in the non-conference.
Well, because you
Not
want
that upsets me.
you know what it is. They played MSU once. They played. They didn't play Iowa until Iowa was kind of bad. They played Purdue once. They play They haven't even played Maryland. They played them in the last game of the year, and they played Wisconsin once. They got the 1 seed buys for just about everybody except for Iowa. I mean, that's the only top team that they played twice. So, the Big Ten tournament or the Big Ten regular season title does not at all mean what it used to, and I think this year exemplified that more than any other. I mean, no one thinks Indiana's the best team in the Big Ten. A lot of people think they're the third best team in the Big Ten, and they're the outright Big Ten champs. But that's the way the schedule shook up because they got all the benefits of the single plays. And
MSU beat them by 20 points at the Breslin.
Yep,
unreal.
But then again, and they lost to Penn State, and they still did it because, they played Wisconsin twice. I don't know if I mentioned that they played Wisconsin twice. The first one was a 1-point home win, and then an overtime loss. But I mean, if MSU. Yeah, I mean, not only that, they're going to win. They may win the Big Ten by 2 games if they beat Maryland. But it's just kind of the way the schedule shook out. And if MSU plays Iowa later in the year, if they don't, crap the bed against Nebraska, Big Ten race could have shaped out differently. And that's where the Big Ten kind of become the ACC now. I think it's starting to, in the sense that the tournament title means a lot more than the regular season title. I don't know if it's there yet, but the regular season title doesn't mean what it used to be. The Big Ten regular season title used to be the thing. That was the goal. Big Ten was one of the last conferences to add a conference tournament. ACC, it's been all about the tournament. And actually the Maryland blog, Testudo Times, pointed it out today, saying Indiana winning the Big Ten isn't that big a deal because the conference regular season isn't that big of a deal. Well, they come from the ACC where it wasn't a big deal. But it was in the Big Ten. And I don't think I don't really think it is anymore. And I think this year especially is kind of exemplifying that because of what the watered down schedules the uneven schedules that have resulted from expansion.
Look, the important part about this conversation is for what reason do they hang banners in the Breslin Center, right? I mean,
right.
That's the argument. I had a friend of mine argue to me something similar, that the tournament was more important than the regular season last weekend. And I said, well, look, the reason that they hang banners at the Breslin are for regular season championships and for Final Fours. So to me, the Big Ten tournament is just not all that important. So, I mean, are they going to start hanging banners for the Big Ten tournament? That seems like a bad idea.
I was surprised they didn't put up one banner where you just kind of add the dates on there. I think that's what Indiana does for Big Ten titles, is they have some banners with just the date on there. And then they have obviously the 5 big championship banners. But I've thought when MSU won the tournament a couple of years ago, I was like, maybe they should put something up there just so people know the years that they won the Big Ten tournament.
Well, I think, if they lost, I think it would take a couple times of MSU losing the regular season but winning the tournament for that to matter. So, if they won the tournament this year, I think that would probably be a more major consideration than it was.
I thought it would have been a major consideration in
13, 14?
14, yeah. That was the one where I thought, they may actually put I think Izzo even said something. He's actually said something about banners, but they haven't done it. So,
well, but the deal of that year too was just that the Big Ten was of certain quality, and winning that tournament meant quite a bit more than winning other tournaments.
That championship game against Ohio State, I covered that tournament. That was a heavyweight prize fight between MSU and Ohio State that year. That was just a really good, well played game between two good teams.
No, you're okay. So you're conflating 12 and 14. So
wait,
2012. You're talking about 2012.
Okay,
2014 was the year that they
2012
beat Michigan.
2012 is the one I thought they were going to put it up. After
Right.
that, because that was the year they lost the Big Ten outright title on the final shot against Ohio State, right?
Correct. Yes.
Right. You're right. Yeah.
Well, and they didn't lose it out. Well, so they lost outright,
They
but
lost
they
the
still
outright.
won a
They
share.
still got a share, but they lost the outright title, and that's where again I think the Big Ten tournament. I thought that maybe they shouldn't have put so much into it because they fizzled out in the Sweet 16 that year against Louisville. But that Big Ten tournament, I think, meant a lot to them because of what had happened on Draymond's senior day. So that's where I thought they were going to put up some sort of banner or start putting together some sort of banners for those. So I don't know. We'll talk. We're talking a lot about the Big Ten tournament. Let's save some of that for next week.
Sure.
Last couple questions here. Did Bryn Forbes just hit another three? Probably. We talked last week about where he ranks all time in MSU shooters. I think we both agreed Respert was ahead of him. That's still the case for me, although Forbes is on his way. I think he's not far from now the single season record for threes. And again, the fact that he's played only his junior and senior years here as opposed to freshman year, his career percentage is going to be inflated because of that, because he didn't have the early years where he wasn't as good of a player. But that brings up the question. Draymond asks, not us, but he asked it. NBA minds smart enough to have Bryn Forbes on their radars yet, or is he, quote, too small for his position? Now, interestingly, Draft Express tweeted out toward the end of the game tonight. Amazing shooting display by Bryn Forbes. Made some really tough threes from all over the floor. Seth Curry-ish. We'll get some NBA looks for sure. I think a lot of people looked at that and thought they said Steph Curry, but Seth Curry, his brother. Yeah, I mean, Forbes is definitely making a case to get looked at. I know Graham Couch wrote a column about it a few days ago. I don't know if he'll get drafted, but I think he'll definitely get a spot on a team. Your thoughts on? I know it may be hard to assess, but your thoughts on Forbes' NBA prospects at this point?
Yeah, the problem with Forbes' NBA prospects is that he does one thing well, but very little else well, and he's also not.
Well, actually, you mentioned that. Graham Couch mentioned that in his column about how you have guys like J.J. Redick who made a career out of basically being a three-point shooter. The difference is Redick is something like 45, 50% in his career, 10 years in the NBA. That's difficult for anybody. He's also small. He's also shooting from the college three-point line. He'll get a chance. I don't know if he'll make a team. His defense is greatly improved under Izzo.
Sure. Well, but my point here is just that. So I think that Bryn Forbes' best comp is John Diebler from a couple of those really good Ohio State teams, and so like JJ Redick. The difference between Bryn Forbes and JJ Redick is that Redick is 6'5", 6'6", and
right,
Bryn Forbes is 6'2", 6'3".
Diebler was 6'6", so.
And Diebler was 6'6", right? So I mean, yeah, the difference is just that. If you're comparing those types of players, I also think that JJ Redick, if you looked him up, would be maybe a little bit better at a couple factors of the game than Bryn Forbes is. I mean, Bryn Forbes, he doesn't turn the ball over much because he isn't doing much of the ball other than shooting.
Yeah.
And so, like, he's absolutely a very valuable college player, and I could see, yeah, like you're saying, I could see him making a roster, maybe, but like John Diebler got drafted, right? John Diebler was the 51st pick in a draft, but I think people kind of expected him to be able to play forward because he was 6'6", whereas Bryn Forbes is 6'3", maybe generously, and yeah, I mean, is he too small? Well, no, right? I mean, there are players in the NBA who are 6'3" or shorter, but
I mean,
they do
you
things
look at
like
Curry.
set set up other
Right.
players, right? I mean,
Steph
there's
Curry's
other
point.
skills that he could possess, and he also doesn't seem to be a standout defender either. He's fine as a defender, but yeah. Anyways, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, we know he can shoot. Setting a Big Ten record, I don't think that makes much of a difference in his. I mean, we know he can shoot. We know he can hit from just about anywhere. He's 70% from threes in the one corner, which is ridiculous. But I think he is what he is. I don't know if anything he does the rest of the season is really going to change his stock that much because, like you said, he's got to show he can do other stuff. And with the way MSU is right now, he's probably not going to do that. So I don't know. He's got a chance to make a roster. He'll get looks. I don't think he'll get drafted, but he'll get looks. And actually, I looked it up while I was talking. Draft Express currently has Deonte Davis, number 12 pick, and Denzel Valentine, number 18. So I don't know if Deonte Davis's career will be done after this year. He hasn't really said much about it. I don't expect him to. He's got a hell of a lot of potential. I think he's just not even really that close to it yet at MSU. I think he's still got a long way to go, but that's a good thing because he's already a pretty good player. Any other NBA thoughts before we wrap up?
No, that's about it. I mean, I think if you were doing, so I worked briefly in the NBA, but if I was doing a regression analysis where I was trying to project Bryn Forbes into the NBA, I don't think that my my projection would be particularly favorable, just because he just doesn't do enough other than shoot, unfortunately.
Yeah. I think Seth Curry was a good comparison. Seth Curry destroyed MSU in the 2013 season.
Yeah, that's right.
And that anything else you wanted to talk about?
No, I mean we got two other questions at least that I wanted to at least address in passing. One was asking us about the mechanics of MSU football captain voting.
Oh, I have no idea. I assume it's one vote for every player, but I couldn't tell you.
Yeah. I also have absolutely no idea, and I think it's just extremely funny that anybody asked the question at all. And then the second one, which was kind of off the wall, was what was your favorite movie of 2015?
Yeah, I guess that means movie you saw in a theater.
I mean, just any movie that you saw in 2015.
I mean, I saw Star Wars a bunch of times. That's the first one that comes to mind. I didn't watch Mad Max until the calendar changed to 2016.
Yeah, but that's still a 2015 movie.
Well, I mean, I didn't see it. This is why I asked if it was a new deal. I don't know. What about you?
I would go with The Big Short. I would say
that looked good, but I also thought it was gonna like make me angry. That's the same reason. That's the same reason I didn't watch Wolf of Wall Street, because I was like, this movie's just gonna piss me off.
Yeah, you're not wrong on either of those fronts, but it didn't necessarily mean that the movie wasn't good. So yeah.
So you're not going with Deadpool?
Well, that was a 2016 movie, anyways, so it wasn't even in the running.
I don't know. I guess I'll go Star Wars because that's all I can think of. I don't see a ton of movies. Hunger Games was good. I think if that came out then. No, I haven't seen Hunger Games. I lied. No, that was 2014.
Yeah, we're sort of the worst two people to ask this question.
I can only remember what I watched maybe in the past week. I can't remember what I did in 2015.
Oh yeah, Avengers came out in 2015. I forgot about that one.
That was a good one.
Yeah, I didn't think that was as good as Big Short. There's just going down the list. There's not that much. So.
All right.
I think we kind of hit most of the questions we could possibly hit at this point.
Yeah, send us some in a week or so. Don't send them right away because we get lost. But assume there's only one game until next week. Not a ton to talk about again. So send us some questions within a few days or a week if you got anything else. So, all right. Well, appreciate you guys listening. And for Joe, this is Chris. And we will talk to you guys next week. See you.
Have a good night.